Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. So, welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast. I thought I would share with y'all a little peek behind the curtains y'all can talk directly to the wizard at Oz. So, a lot of people think the hard part of podcasting is coming up with topics every week, and that's challenging sometimes. However, since prepping is a lifestyle, there's always something to talk about, and when you're in the Second Amendment space and, you're very pro-gun, the disarmatards always give us plenty to talk about because they won't shut the hell up and just accept that we have a right to keep and bear arms. So finding a topic is not as difficult as you might imagine. The really tricky part is figuring out what kind of social lubricant to apply to the host to get peak performance. Because you see, in the past, I've gone with coffee and Baileys, which is my go-to drink, and I found it mellowed me too much for a really hard Phil rant. And then on the air side of things, if I go straight to the whiskey, it's like injecting angry juice into my engine, and then I can't be eloquent. So I thought I would try a nice mix of locally brewed cream soda and whiskey, and we'll see if that gives angry yet eloquent Phil to the audience.
Well, that's not fair. You didn't tell me. I would have grabbed some beer.
I didn't realize you needed an invitation to grab beer or whiskey before the show. I assumed that was just
I can't be the one always drinking, so, I got to start it off a little bit.
I just wanted to kind of introduce the show today in a little bit of a lighthearted way. It might keep me from screeching bloody murder by the end of it. Although we have one topic that's going to aggravate me and a bunch that aren't. So, I don't know. Got to find the happy middle ground. Challenge accepted. I thought we would start with a question from Patreon because, we have patrons and they are gracious enough to not only put up with our BS every week, but actually they're enough of a masochist that they contribute money to keep the show going. So I felt it important to address the question we recently got on one of our old episodes. So Ben asked, and this is in relation to an episode we did, I don't know, probably 4 years ago about bugging out. He asked, what do you take for comms and maps other than your cell phone? What kind of knot do you use or carabiners? And what kind of battery bank or solar do you use? So Andrew and I were talking about this briefly right before we came up online. Personally for comms and maps, cell phone is a beautiful thing, as long as you don't mind the NSA listening on everything you say. But it's not always the most reliable thing when you get way out in the middle of stinking nowhere. So I tend to also bring printed out maps with me. I guess you could have the old school enormous map book of the entire U.S., but I usually take some printed maps from Google Earth or whatever your preferred method is. I like to have some paper maps as a backup. And for comm backup, I usually pack a set of Motorola T800s. Purely so that I have something that I know for a fact, because I've used it in this capacity, will easily give me a half-mile of range. And I can hand one to my daughter, and I can keep one, and I have comms with her that doesn't depend on a cell phone signal.
Yeah, comms, as of right now, nothing. Basically, just if it's a cell phone and if you lose service, you lose service. I guess that's a good thing in a way, unless you need help. And then hopefully something, the stars align and you get service. Or I know if you dial 911, usually on locks, it's supposed to bounce off towers or something, some technological stuff, But anyway, no, but that's going to change because I'm actually in the process. September, I actually am signed up for a ham class, so I plan on getting back into ham more. So that's going to change because I'll start taking my ham with me, my radio and stuff like that. And I know that's line of sight. So if you're down in a valley and stuff like that, but if you can connect to repeaters and stuff, it's, if you need help, you can definitely use it. It's another form, another avenue. The other thing I was kind of looking at, I've been researching off and on, and it's something that I need a group of people to do it, but you can create mesh networks. I can't remember exactly what the company's called, but basically it's just and you can and there's a couple different ways of doing it, but basically you can buy like these sticks that they connect to each other, and then you can actually connect to them, and it creates a mesh network. But and the only way you can actually get on that network is if you have one. I mean, it's a secured network if you found it, but you have to have like your phone connected to one of these devices, and you can actually like talk back and forth to people and everything like that. So that would be an interesting thing to do too. And honestly, if you had a group of people, like if you had a if you had a group of neighbors, 5 6 neighbors that you are all in the same kind of group, same mindset, stuff like that, you could all get this, and then you could actually have it's a way of creating basically comms off grid. So that could actually be interesting too, especially like down where you're at with the hurricanes. I mean, it could work anywhere, but like I really see it useful for you, Phil, down in Hurricane Alley there. That if you could, I mean, if you had basically if you had a network with basically, I mean, you almost could do it with all your neighbors. If you say you have a dozen neighbors, and during a hurricane, phones go out. I mean, you guys could boot these up, and you could, hey, are you okay? Hey, this, go back and forth. So, as far as maps go, I have the big booklet of maps. Actually, it's probably outdated by now, so it's been a number of years. So actually, I probably need to buy a new one, get a more updated one. So I have that, but I mostly like if I'm going somewhere where I don't think I'm going to have service, or even if I do know if I'm going to have service, I'll go download the maps to my phone, download that area off of Google Maps, so that if GPS and stuff, you could actually still see. And I've done that a few times. So and then as far as solar or battery bank, I don't have solar right now, but I know you have a battery bank and solar, but I have basically just batteries, or smaller batteries, like rechargeable battery banks and stuff like that. So
Mm. Yeah, as far as like battery banks, I have no earthly idea what brand these are. These are all over Amazon. They all look like this. They're sold by a bunch of different companies. They're all made in China. None of them are particularly expensive, and they have a reasonable amount of power. But like I don't invest a lot of thought or attention in these things as far as where I source them from. I'm not big on buying one that has good warranty, because to me these are functionally disposable. Like whenever one stops holding a charge or dies, and I've used one of these until it literally just gave up. Like it wouldn't take a charge, it wouldn't turn on, quote unquote turn on when you plug anything into it. It just packed it up. So when that happened, I pitched it and replaced it with another one. So like these smaller, like cell phone size battery banks, I wouldn't profess one brand over another, because I don't believe that the functionality or the quality control of any one of them really justifies a big increase in price over another. Just buy a couple so you have redundancy. So if one dies, it's like, who cares? That being said, I also have that Jackery 1000 back there, and I've had that conversation before about the fact that I could have bought Jackery, EcoFlow, Blue Eddy, Goal Zero. Like there's lots of different options in that space. I got Jackery mostly because it's made in the US, and at the time it seemed like it kind of hit all my marks as far as cost to performance to warranty to quality control and everything else. The one thing I have to point out about Jackeries, because it's not entirely a bad thing, but it is something worth pointing out, is that Jackeries, because they use lithium-ion batteries, they do have a shorter lifespan before your charge capacity starts to roll off. That's just endemic to lithium-ion versus lithium iron phosphate. But what you get with Jackeries is, for the same power density, you get a much smaller, much lighter package. So if what you're looking for is something you can grab by the handle and put in and out of the back of a vehicle, or you can tote around a campsite, I like Jackeries. If what you're looking for is something you can like run a refrigerator off of for a power outage for 3 or 4 days, skip that entire product line and go get either get something like an EcoFlow with lithium iron phosphate batteries, which you can up and down many more times than you can a lithium ion battery, but it's going to weigh a lot more. or look at like, Solarc or something like that, and server rack batteries, and like build your own system that doesn't have to be small and portable. It's a question of how you're going to use it. But like, there are more reviews out there from channels that specialize in that kind of thing than I feel I am qualified to give my opinion on, except to say that like for my use, which is largely revolves around truck camping, the Jackery 1000 was the good intersection of, can it do what I need it to do? Is it small and light enough? And is it something that is useful in my application? And as far as knots, like I told Andrew, I am not a knot nerd. I couldn't tell you what knot I tie half the time. It might have a name, it might not. It might just be a tangle of rope that doesn't slip anymore, and that I said, okay, it's tied. I don't know. I'm not a Boy Scout. I do say that as far as carabiners, like, I don't resort to carabiners terribly often. I usually will tie like a slip knot or a hitch or something like that I can kind of tie it, tension it, but then the last thing I always do on a knot is I pull a hitch through the knot. That way I can yank it out the other side by the tail and I can untie the knot easily.
Uh-huh.
Like I am very, huh?
So that's the same thing I do.
Yeah. I'm very, very averse to tying knots that I cannot undo, mostly because I've effed around and found out many times and had to
Yeah,
cut rope.
I mean, carabiners, you can't go wrong. I know I have a couple in my bags and stuff, just in case you need to hang something. But yeah, no, I honestly, and yeah, knots. I don't know the names of knots at all. When I was in the fire department, I used to be really good at doing knots, but not so much anymore. But I like to focus. I use slip knot a lot, and then I like to use like a fisherman's knot, and not just on like uh, tackle on fishing rods and that kind of line. But even with paracord and stuff, if I'm tying some paracord up, sometimes if I don't want it to come undone, I mean, I'll tie kind of do like a fisherman's knot in a way, loop it through whatever and or loop it around whatever and kind of wrap it around and tuck it in. And I don't know. It's I other than that, I don't know names, so it's just like I'll tie it and then it'll hold, and I'm like, okay, cool, it's a knot.
It's a knot. So, on to the irritating part of the show, and then we'll finish up with something that isn't going to make my blood pressure go up.
Why is this
So,
irritating? This is actually common sense.
Andrew, please don't play with my emotions. Just don't. So, I used a term that I'm going to use from now on for the anti-gunners. I'm going to call them disarmatards because it perfectly describes what their intention is and how I regard them. They're functionally stupid. And their goal is to take your guns. Like, they have completely and totally gone off the reservation, and they've given up all pretense of being reasonable to anybody but their moronic ilk. They're disarmatards. So, Governor Newsom, the head disarmatard of the moment, seems to want to repeal the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution by proposing
Nope. You're wrong.
How
You
am I
are wrong. It's he does not want to repeal the Second Amendment. This is what's funny is I just kind of wanted to say that you're wrong because I'm trying to play devil's advocate here and defend Governor Newsom in your favor. But no, in the statement that I read from him is and this is what's funny is we do not want to change the Second Amendment. We want to keep the Second Amendment as is. However, it's like, but yeah, exactly that and that's his statement that I saw on TV too, on an interview, and it's just like, but I'm proposing a 28th Amendment to basically change the Second Amendment. So
Yeah. So for the audio listeners, let me read off this first paragraph, and then you can tell me how wrong I am that this moron wants to shred the Second Amendment. Sacramento, today, Governor Gavin Newsom, head disarmatard, proposed a 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution to enshrine fundamental, broadly supported gun safety measures into law, while leaving the Second Amendment unchanged and respecting America's gun-owning tradition. The governor's proposal guarantees common sense constitutional protections and gun safety measures that Democrats, Republicans, independent voters, and gun owners overwhelmingly support, including universal background checks, raising the firearms purchase age to 21, instituting a firearm purchase waiting period, and barring the civilian purchase of assault weapons.
So scary, that term. I get shivers down my back. Um, what? Yeah, and basically, this what this stems from is the fact that he can't push his anti-gun agenda across the United States fast enough, and it's getting shot down left and right. And so, and then with the whole Bruin, this is also I think this also stems from the whole Bruin case, and then the fact that the Supreme Court and multiple courts have been striking down unconstitutional gun laws left and right. Well, it can't be unconstitutional if it's in the Constitution. Is I think is his thinking. So let's get this in the Constitution. So then people can't say it's unconstitutional. They can point right to it. It's in the 20th Amendment, and it's constitutional because it's written right there. Um, so yeah, I mean, what's interesting is the idea that anybody who is in favor of gun control, when they say, and I love their saying, nobody is coming for your guns. If you look at any of their bills that they've been trying to pass, it's literally like what you and I've been talking about. It's literally hundreds of firearms. It's every I mean, it's every kind of quote unquote assault weapon or AR-15 and every variant that you can think of, and different shotguns and different. You know, I it's crazy because yeah, they are literally coming for your guns. They
Well,
want to come in, and the only thing they're not doing is they're not stacking up and coming into my house. They want to send guys with guns to take my guns because for some reason they want to give the government more control. Which I mean, I guess that's ultimately what they want to do, is disarm the population while giving government the ultimate control. Because then who can fight back?
yeah, I mean, and if we look just at AR-15s in circulation in America, like I looked up a statistic that said there was like 15 million, and
It's higher.
that's, huh? I'm sure it
That's way
is, but
higher.
it's like the old meme of how many guns. Uh, I had 3 guns. The government took 2 of them. How many do I have left? I have 15 because I lied to the
Yeah.
SOBs about how many guns I had. Like, I seriously quit any statistic involving firearm ownership. I kind of cock my eyebrow and to say the ones you know about,
Mhm.
because I really doubt they have although the ATF's registry, all the 4473s they've been cataloging, who knows, they might have accurate information by now. But I don't know, man. I mean, like you talk about, let's say low watermark 15 million AR-15s. That's not a small number of firearms that you're targeting. But like you said, like look at the assault weapon ban that just passed in Illinois recently. I mean, my wife's freaking like Remington hunting rifle, according to the Illinois assault weapons ban, is an assault weapon, and it has a wood stock, and it's a deer rifle. It's a 30-06, but it's semi-auto magazine fed with a detachable box magazine. So there you go.
Well,
It's
that
it's it,
I mean,
Go
have you ever
ahead.
seen a picture of the 22, like the Ruger, like basically like a Ruger 1022? Like it's like the different styles, and it starts with the old school wood stock, and it was like this is a Ruger 1022, and then it goes to a different one that's like basically the same thing just with like a plastic stock. This is a Ruger 1022, and then it goes to one that's like it's looks like an AR-15, but it's like this is a Ruger 10. This is a 1022. Like these are all 22 rifles, and the only reason that they look at one and say, "Oh, it's scary," is because it's what they deem inappropriate and scary. It's all about attachments. If you read any of the stuff, it's you can't have a muzzle shroud, you can't, or like a muzzle device, you can't have a shroud like a shotgun, you can't have a like a barrel, or like I don't remember what they call it, but like something that it goes over the barrel, and then you can't have, I don't know, it's stupid. It's crazy what they're trying to do. This has no way of passing just because of the fact that you need 2/3 from each chamber um, to a vote, and then also, or you can do a convention of states, which is the states actually getting together. But I don't think they want that to happen because as of right now, they do have like even if the Democrats had both House and Senate, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to try to do the push the 2/3 vote," and it fails, and then but the thing is, though, is they might have the majority in the Senate and the House, which they don't right now. But if they try to do a 2/3, like a convention of the states, um, there's a lot of red states. There, there's a lot of like actually there's more on the docket of hey limiting government that I've seen come up more for convention of states than anything. So, go ahead, call a convention of states, see what happens because I don't think it's going to go in your favor, just because of what I've seen some articles about.
Yeah, I mean, the two things I feel forced to own up to or admit at this point is like a lot of the reason why you see most of the past assault weapons bills that are referencing features is because every time these idiots have tried to like name a firearm or say AR-15, it gets swatted down in court. Like it gets swatted down. It continues to get swatted down in court, and that's why I think they're going after features as they're trying to define something, but they can't say the quiet part out loud. But the other thing that really frustrates me is like there was a time in this country where I think this might have been able to get legs underneath it, and I might be wrong. We could be having this exact same conversation in about 6 months, and I'd be screeching bloody murder because it's getting traction. But I think that the proportion of people that would have any sort of appetite for this kind of nonsense is probably greatly diminished post COVID. Because COVID, I think, is now becoming a watershed moment for people to realize that the government at all level and its power has to be reined in because they flexed so hard. The moment government started telling people you can't go to work, you have to shut down your business, you have to shut down your livelihood, you can't go visit your family in the hospital, you can't visit grandma on her deathbed. Like, by now has seen the video of people who were at a freaking funeral and were being told you have to maintain social distancing. You couldn't even comfort your loved one in the same room when they were crying. Everyone's seen that. And I really feel I have the tiniest little bit of faith in my common man, my fellow countrymen, to think maybe I wasn't the only one really sickened and pissed off at that point in time. But I would like to think enough people have now had the blinders ripped off and they see what happened and they say, never again do I want those psychopaths to have an inch more of authority over my life than they currently do. So, I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. Like, Gavin Newsom, you wanna call a convention of the states? Go have a party. I can bet there's going to be 30 other states that would love to take your attempt at subverting the Second Amendment, tell you to kick rocks, and propose something that will cause you to have a stroke. Because there is appetite, and there have been calls from governors, from attorney generals, and from people to call a convention of states specifically to reinforce the Second Amendment. Specifically to force the alphabet agencies to back off and let people live their lives. So, on the one hand, you have the disarmatards, and I don't know why you had to send Whoopi Goldberg to my text messages the other day. That was not fun. Please don't do that again. But like all these people screeching, yelling about, oh, it's just one rifle. Like, no, it's not just one rifle, you morons. Because what you're going to do is you're going to say anything that's semi-automatic and has a detachable box magazine is an assault weapon. So you're literally talking about the total armory of a large cross-section of American gun owners. 20% of gun owners currently admitted to having an AR-15, which means the percentage is likely higher. But if you start including things like ARs and SIG MPXs, I mean, Andrew, open a catalog from a gun store right now. How many of those firearms have detachable box magazines and are semi-automatic? Almost all of them. Almost all of them. So when they say assault weapons, what they're really saying is we're going to find a way to define anything the American public has access to that would give them a reasonable chance of defending them against a violent attack by anybody. And I'm just not okay with that. And I don't think, contrary to what they're saying in this article, I don't think there's a lot of appetite for that amongst Republicans. I don't think there's a lot of appetite for that amongst independents, and I certainly don't think there's a lot of appetite for that amongst gun owners. I think most gun owners at this point are seeing the writing on the wall, and the fact that like year after year after year, firearm purchases have continued to escalate, even as inflation has wrecked people's financial futures, even as it's driven the cost of firearms up and it's decreased the amount of expendable income, they continue to buy more guns. I don't think the same gun owning public that is purchasing more firearms than what it takes to arm the Marine Corps every year is in favor of letting Gavin Newsom and the rest of the disarmatards take their frickin' AR-15s. I just don't. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. We'll have the same conversation again later, and you can tell me how wrong I was. We can replay this little excerpt. But I would like to think that sooner or later, somebody's going to tell this dude, kick rocks. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, hopefully. I mean, it'd be nice if they could, unthrone him and like take him out of the state. But California is a lost cause. It sucks because it used to be. It looks like a nice place, like as far as weather and stuff goes, but the homeless and how crappy it is. But it'd be interesting. I would actually love to see the northern half secede. I know they've been trying multiple times to split up into smaller chunks because, I mean, basically you have a couple major cities affecting the entire state. Pretty much just like every state almost. I mean, yeah, California. I mean, look at Michigan. You have Detroit, Lansing, Flint, and Marquette up in the UP, and actually Grand Rapids is turning kind of liberal too. It's pretty liberal to now getting there. So you have like the cities that are just decimating and controlling the vote, which is to me is wrong. So it's going to be interesting.
The interesting dichotomy though that is California, because like we know a family that I would like to say they expatriated themselves from California by the grace of God and went to Texas, where they're much happier, by the way. But they
Yeah.
came from Northern California, and I know through talks I've had with them, they said that Northern California is like deep, deep red, rural, gun owning, super conservative, and the part that makes California unique amongst a lot of these other states, and tell me if Michigan falls into this bucket because geographically I don't think it does, but I could be wrong. But California, those three states that control the whole state, or those three cities that control the state, they're in a fairly isolated part of the state. In other words, like you could shave off a relatively small percentage of California's landmass and isolate those three cities by themselves. Whereas, like take Louisiana for example, we've got Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans, and those are your three. Those you could argue Lafayette to a degree, but those are your three big, deep blue holdouts in the state. But Shreveport is at the far north, Baton Rouge is almost in the middle of the state, and New Orleans is in the southeast corner, or towards the southeast corner. So you're in this weird situation where it's like, okay, well, if we split Louisiana, how do we carve it when those three cities are so spread out to where like the liberals have one half and the conservatives have the other? It can't be done. And that's the problem with a lot of states is that
Like
there
Texas,
is no.
Austin,
Yeah,
you know.
okay. How do you cleave Texas in half to keep to like split the state and give half to the liberals and half to conservatives? I don't think it can be done, and that's and this is like totally obfuscating the fact that if you do that, there's going to be this enormous bar fight over territory and property and resources and everything else. But like, let's pretend all that doesn't happen for just a moment. How do you cleave most of these states in half? I don't know if it can be done.
Yeah.
And it's become fairly obvious that the two disparate populations don't want to live with each other and don't want to coexist because I've said time after time, the simplest way for these two groups to coexist is just to leave each other the hell alone. Like, that was the reason our government was set up the way it was in the first place, was to do as little as possible and let people manage their own affairs. And if you don't want to own a gun, you don't have to own a gun, but you don't get to screech and cry when the Indians come to hunt you down either. You get to deal with the consequences of your actions or inactions. But in this case, what we have is we have a government that has accrued so much power that whoever is in charge of it, whenever one side is in charge of it, the other side just will like sit around and do nothing, in my opinion, which I don't know if that annoys me more or less, but whatever. But whenever one side gets control of that apparatus of power, they like to flex it to make the other side, squirm. And that can't be sustained forever. Like sooner or later, we as a country have to understand that the constitutionally imposed limits of federal and state and local government power were imposed so that people who didn't agree could coexist. Because you could say, my neighbor isn't living their life the way I do, but it's my property, my life, my family, and I'm going to mind my daggum business. It's when I start to get it in my head like, oh, well, I don't like what they're doing, so I'm going to force them to do it my way, or they do it to me. The minute that happens, this whole like gentle ladies agreement that we all live and let live just disintegrates. So like that's my spiel about gun ownership. If you don't want to own guns, don't own guns. That's fine. The minute you start talking about gun violence, there's a root word in there, and it's not gun, it's violence. And I can point to instances in history where people have been harmed with a whole bunch of things that are not guns, and taking the daggum guns is not going to help, because if gun laws worked, Chicago would be the safest freaking city on earth, and it's not. And I cannot remember what governor it was, but he was on The View. Poor soul, must be a glutton for punishment. And freaking one of the hosts was like on his butt about how he wouldn't support an assault weapons ban. And he brought up Chicago. And then she foolishly stuck her head in the bear trap and said, well, the reason Chicago has gun violence is because all the states around Illinois don't have strict gun laws. To which the governor replied, then why don't they have issues with gun violence? And that's where the conversation falls apart. Like, you look at all these places where gun control has been implemented to the degree that Gavin Newsom wants, and their crime rate has not gone down, it's gone up. And then you look at all the places with the lax gun laws where they have constitutional carry, where grandma's got a friggin' shotgun to protect herself on her front porch, and lo and behold, their violent crime rate is on the floor, because people understand FAFO. Wherever there's castle doctrine, there's less crime. Wherever people have the right to defend themselves, there's less crime. I'm not making it up. Find the statistics. Fact check me if you want. I'm right, and I know I'm right. So, I'm willing to have a discussion with a person who honestly, ardently believes what they're proposing will make the world a better place to live, but I am going to require that conversation be rooted in rationality, and I'm going to demand that you show me your policies have an honest chance of working, when I can find statistics to say they've been tried and they don't. And the minute I can find that, I don't want to hear it again. It doesn't work, it's not going to. Okay, so I think we found the proper mixture of angry, eloquent juice. It's whiskey and cream soda. That allows me to get a little bit wound up, but not turn into a screaming meltdown, Phil. So, let's have the discussion that is going to piss off the rest of the internet nerds, but I think might actually be very interesting. Andrew, tell the audience what you think Chinesium is.
I mean, anything made in China.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a pejorative term. It's anything made in China. It usually refers to things that are like shoddily, crappily made in China, cheaply made in China. Think anything you found on AliExpress or Wish.com, that kind of stuff.
Or some of the stuff you find on Amazon.
Or a lot of the stuff you find on Amazon. But at the same time, there are those people that think like HoloSun is Chinesium, and I kind of push back on that, because when HoloSun first showed up on my radar, I was like, Chinese optic company. Like, how many times are you gonna pull that trigger before this HoloSun 407 like ejects its glass out the front of it on recoil? Because that was our experience with cheaply made stuff. It didn't hold up well, and then lo and behold, HoloSun like really got their stuff together and started making really, really good stuff for a reasonable price. Like, you and I have been talking about, as I've gone into the descent of madness that is night vision, we've been talking a lot about the LS321, their laser aiming module. And I'm like, cost for performance, that's a good intersection point. Like, for like $750 up to about $850, it looks like it holds up pretty well. It's got decent enough performance. I mean, is it as good as a $1,500 or a $2,000 Lamb? Pretty close. Is it as good as a $3,500 B.E. Myers Mall? Absolutely not. But it's less than $1,000. I wouldn't expect it to perform as good as something that costs 3 times as much, and I'm okay with that compromise. So, like, the question of what is Chinesium is a thing, but I think for the purposes of this conversation, Chinesium is like crappy products, badly made, shoddy, pot metal, soft aluminum, that sort of thing. It's stuff that it looks the part, but it doesn't perform like it. But this also brings up an interesting conversation because, I just have two examples to show the video audience, and the rest of y'all just have to take my word on this in audio. But this was the example I was giving to Andrew. I'm like, okay, here is the GBRS group Hydra. For anybody not familiar, it's an optics mounting option to give you a very, very tall optic mount for night vision, while also having given you a spot to put either a light or a laser aiming module, most likely. And it's $500 freaking dollars. That's like, it's like a Glock 19 for an optics mount. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we can reasonably say this is, you would say premium. I call it hideously expensive. It's $500, and then you're gonna put an aim point or friggin', something on top of it. It's going to cost even more money, and then a $2,000 lamb. And yes, I understand this is like first world problems that we're talking about this, but it's a $500 piece of equipment. And then you compare it to the Amazon quote unquote airsoft Chinese knockoff, which is, I don't even know how to pronounce that, but a tactical mount kit, riser, scope mount for laser scope, holographic red dot sight combo adapter, rail 20mm mount base tan. But it looks exactly like the GBRS, and it's $70. And I was following a discussion on ARFCOM where somebody bought one of these things. I don't remember if it was this brand specifically, but it was another of the Amazon Hydra knockoffs. And they held it. They had pictures of it before the conversation really got started. Pictures of it side by side with a legit Hydra. Almost every single person said the Amazon knockoff had a better paint finish and had like cleaner cut angles and everything in the casting than the actual Hydra did. No one could tell it was difficult enough to tell the difference that a lot of people picked the wrong item as the Chinesium Amazon one. Huh. Now, of course, we're not talking about strength or, whatever else, but we're just talking about on basic appearance. It's moments like this I start to question myself. I'm like, okay, if a company could manufacture this, even assuming slave labor, which let's call what it is China uses, even assuming slave labor, they were able to produce this, finish it, paint it, box it, and ship it to the U.S. for $70 versus the Hydra, which is $500. And I don't know where the Hydra is manufactured. It could be machined here in the U.S. But that disparity in price really starts to call into question for me what the next topic is after I find out what this question is. Anything from Harbor Freight. You know what? I'm going to say I've bought stuff from Harbor Freight, and if you're a real mechanic or handyman, you have too. And most of it has lasted at least long enough to get the job done. Most of it. I wouldn't expect you to be able to hand it down to your kids, though, because it ain't going to last that long. So, like, this is one of those things that got me thinking about the last topic we're going to talk about, which is just as good, just as good. Now, this is a raging debate, not just in the gun community, but a lot of places, but definitely in the gun community, about is just as good, just as good. There are whole Facebook groups and there's whole social media accounts that base themselves around is just as good, just as good. But I look at this Hydra, the fake Hydra mount, and I look at the real one, and I'm like, how much better does it have to be to justify, what is that, a seven times price increase? You see where I'm going with this, bub?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that's the thing is, and I what's crazy is the Hydra that I honestly don't think it needs to be that expensive. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what went into it, what metal they're using. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably aluminum or something. But I don't know. A lot of it is just kind of like what we were talking about before the show was kind of they're selling the name. It's a name brand. GBRS is known for the two of the former special ops guys, um, the DevGru, the two owners that are former DevGru guys, and so like they're using their name or they're using their their background to sell it, and so a lot of people are buying it because they're like, oh man, if it's good enough for the guys from SEAL Team 6 or whatever, it's good enough for me. Well, yeah, of course they're going to try to sell it to you, and I mean, and it might be good. Like, I mean, they're it's it. I think it pushes like I think it's like one of the highest mounts on the market that raises the dot up. But something like this, and Jaegerworks, they do slide milling stuff out of Kalamazoo. Um, they kind of developed something similar to this. They have the mount, but then they also have the attachment. You can buy them separate, so it's not all one unit. But it's something that I was looking at. I did look at not this one, but the one from Jaegerworks. I did look at it for like the CZ for the Scorpion. Because of the fact, or even like a 10.5 inch or a shorter barrel AR, just because of real estate. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
go all crazy and you want to have a laser setup, especially for night vision, you want to have a tall mount that's comfortable for shooting, heads up with the laser. I mean, this is great, and but it's like when you're sitting there like, okay, well, I'm piecing this together and I'm doing this. It's like $500 for a mount. It's like, come on, guys. Like, where do I want to put my money? I mean, I look at it the same way when I build it. When I research building like a new computer or something. It's like, well, where do I want to put my money? I mean, when I'm talking to people about building rifles, it's like you can build a rifle and you can do one for a pretty good price, but figure out where you want to put your money, what you want to invest in, what you want to spend money on, and then you can upgrade parts down the road. And I mean, that's the thing with this is with a mount, I would go with a lower cost mount. I mean, I probably want to get the Amazon special, but I would definitely be looking at different avenues, different companies, different ways of doing stuff that'll make it work for a third of the price. And then if you really want this, once you get things set up and how you want it, now save up and you can buy, spend the money and get your Gucci mount that you want. But yeah, it's difficult because concept is great, I think, but product I think is you're paying for the name, and that's unfortunately you're paying. That's what happens across in the gun. Well, I mean, really, it's anything. I mean, you name it, really, and it's some of the stuff is you're paying for the name. Spikes Tactical, BCM, they make really good stuff, but a lot of their price increase comes from the name, and that's what just frustrates me.
And I guess that's the part of this that bugs me is like there's two things. There's two potential things in play other than manufacturing cost, recoup of investment, because like that's going to apply to anything. There is, you could say paying for the name. In the car world, we used to call it the BMW complex. In other words, like it's a $15,000 car with a $30,000, blue and white propeller on the hood. In other words, like the car is not that great, but it's a BMW, so people buy it. And then there's also this thing that happens in lots of different industries where you have what's called the perceived value. And the perceived value, like let's say you and I've talked about Toyota. You bought a Toyota Tacoma, I bought a Toyota Tacoma. We did, I think, that for some of the same reasons, because Toyotas have a reputation that is well earned for reliability, for dependability, for being overbuilt, for being tough. And as a result of that, there is a perceived value in spending paying the Toyota tax, basically. And then you get into some of these weird situations where, like, when I was autocrossing a long time ago, you would be classed according to what vehicle you had. Like, if you were in stock class, obviously a Corvette and a Honda Civic do not belong in the same class prepared to the same rule set because one is obviously going to be a lot faster than the other. Excuse me one second. Okay. Sorry I blew everybody's ears out. So in that case, they have like A stock, B stock, C stock, D stock, and I think E might have been the lowest. And that is based on the power and the handling, but it's meant to take vehicles that should compete roughly on even ground and put them together so the Honda Civic and the Chevy Corvette are not competing with each other. However, there was this weird situation in the early 2000s where, do you remember the Chrysler Crossfire? It was the little bitty two seater. It was a little bitty two seater. I think most of them were convertibles. It was rear wheel drive. It had a little V6 in the front. Look it up if you don't remember it. But the Chrysler Crossfire was the love child of Chrysler grew getting in bed with Daimler, with Mercedes, Daimler Chrysler. Like that's where that whole thing started way back in the day. So the Chrysler Crossfire was a rebadged but not redesigned Mercedes. And the funny part of this was the Mercedes, for this period of time before the SCCA corrected it, the Mercedes was classed higher than the Crossfire was. So you could the Crossfire was like annihilating its class that year because of this weird, I don't know what lapse in judgment they had, but they basically took like, I think it might have been the C stock Mercedes, but because it had a Chrysler badge on it, they put it in D stock, and it was just eating D stock for lunch. Like nobody in D stock that didn't have a Chrysler Crossfire could compete. And eventually they moved the Crossfire up into the higher class where it should have been all along. But there is such a thing as perceived value, and sometimes that's driven by nothing more than cost. Like it's a $500 amount. It has to be $430 better than the $70 Amazon special. But is it $430 better? Can you tell me that the Hydra is $300 better than a Unity Tactical? That will do virtually the same thing. I don't know what JagerWorks costs, but it's got to be about in the same price range. It's just, to me, like there is an amount of money that I think is reasonable to say spend the extra money to get a better product. And then once we eclipse a certain level, now we're spending extra money. And I don't think a dollar extra spent is a dollar more performance. So this is the infamous lower receiver argument. Now, I looked up all three of these lowers the other day, and of course, when I went to get screenshots of the prices, Anderson's freaking website is down. Thank y'all for that. Totally screwed my day up. But as of the last time I checked Anderson, which was a couple of days ago, their lowers at full MSRP on their website. I don't care if you can get them cheaper from Bubba or from your gunsmith or from a website. I don't care if they're on sale. I had to look up MSRP to make this an apples to apples comparison. Anderson lowers, basic lowers were going for $80 a whack. I know you can get them cheaper. Stick with me. Aero Precision's charging $110, so $30 more. I don't know what that is in percentages. You can do math just as well as I can. Andrew, would you allow that Aero Precision likely has a better reputation for quality control and craftsmanship than Anderson does?
Yeah.
Would you allow that? That doesn't mean Andersons are crap. There's plenty of guns built on them that work just perfectly, but Aero Precision does have a better perceived value. And that's not necessarily driven by cost. It's driven by, statistics and numbers and people's anecdotal experience that most people have been around long enough in the gun community to know that somebody had an issue with an Anderson, and I don't think anybody's ever had an issue, not that I've ever heard, with an Aero Precision lower being bunk. And then you get to Zev, who charges $138 for their lower. Now, I don't mean to sound critical here, but the Aero Precision and the Zev lower look exactly the same. And they should be dimensionally identical. And they are almost certainly made of exactly the same metal, tempered the exact same way, finished the exact same way. So, while I'm willing to accept a $20 to $30 premium over an Anderson gets you a better lower in an Aero, I'm not sure I'm as willing to believe that $30 more from the Aero to the Zev gives you a $30 better performance at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, that's the thing is go. I mean, I have guns that are made from Anderson, and I've never had issues. I've had issues with a lower one of my first guns that I ever built. I don't actually own it anymore, but the lower from I think it was R Guns in Illinois. The lower I fought that lower left and right. Come to find out, it wasn't milled. It wasn't milled enough. It wasn't milled enough in the trigger area. So
Oh,
so yeah, um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I sent it back. They sent it back to me, and it was fine. And that's what they told me. They said, "Oh yeah, it's something. It was like a minor, just a fraction that wasn't milled right." Well, I mean, are you going to run into that with Arrow? I don't think so. You could. I mean, it's a mistake. Are you going to run into that with spikes? You could. It's a mistake. Like companies make mistakes. It's how they handle it and make it right is what matters to me. But that being said, I mean, if you can afford an Anderson and that's what you got, like you're like, hey, that's in my budget. By all means, I would say get it. Um, and that's actually why I left. I stopped going on like Facebook and stopped going on some of these groups, these forums and stuff, is because of the guys who are like, well, if your gun didn't cost, if you didn't spend like at least 2 or 3 thousand on your gun, you're nothing. Like your gun is crap. It's like, dude, I've ran my Anderson quite a bit. My Arrow, I don't even know how many rounds I have through that lower and everything, and through that build, never had issues. Um, and I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, and that's the thing. To me, it just comes down to budget. And the thing is if you can build something and you can have, excuse me, you can have it, and you're proficient with it and you're running it, by all means, and that's good. What I like is I believe Trek. Trek has a gun with like an Anderson with Anderson parts and stuff on it, and he runs that at classes just to show people like, hey, Anderson, these cheap. It's a cheaper rifle, but hey, it works good. And then he
yeah,
has a Zev. Then he has a Zev rifle that he mortars into the ground to clear malfunctions. I mean, it's no rifle should be a safe queen, but when you look at the price of the Zevs and stuff, and you're mortaring it into the ground to clear malfunctions, you're just like, holy crap! But hey, that's what they're for.
yeah, and I think at the end of the day, like that's where I fall on the argument of just as good. It's always going to come down to like it's like you and I always talk about. It's like the FAFO graph, where the more you F around, the more you find out. Like I do believe there is a price and performance graph, and everything, especially in the gun community, but everything is going to fall somewhere on that graph. Now, ultimately what you want is the most performance for the least money. Like if we could be way up in this region where we're at like 10 performance and 1 money, we'd all be freaking excited, but it doesn't usually work out that way unless something falls off the back of a truck. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But like, you want the maximum performance for the least amount of money, and I think most things are going to fall right on either side of a certain line, where the more you spend, the more performance you get, and it's the outliers that are off of that line where you got to be suspicious. So if somebody starts advertising like, this is like $100 AR barrel, and it is sub-minute of some sub-MOA accurate with any ammunition there is, I'd be really suspicious of that, because it sounds a little too good to be true. And my common sense is telling me it's absolutely too good to be true because it's way off the price to performance line. And then we get into things like, the Hydra. Am I saying it's a bad product? No. The guys look like they designed it for a very niche application. In that application, it's probably really freaking awesome. But for me, it is so far off the price to performance line. It's like way, way high on the price, and the performance is like debatable for my application. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that. But then you get into things like some of the products you and I've used over the years, where it's like, like look at the base of most of the rifles we built. I know we're both really big on air precision uppers and lowers. There's a good reason for that. The daggum things work. They work right out of the box. They're dimensionally accurate. They're friggin' built right. It's not that they're anything special. It's that they're done right. So I know I'm working from a good base. I'm a big proponent of facts and barrels. No surprise there. They're reasonably priced. They work really well. Why wouldn't I be a fan of that? Magpul furniture, not because it's anything spectacular or special, but because it does the job it's intended to for a reasonable price. And that tends to be a lot of what I look for. I am not the high tier snob. And, being a working class person with a family, I don't have $3,000 to chuck at an AR most of the time. I've got to build it over time. I've got to look for deals. I've got to really debate with myself how much is an appropriate amount to spend to get the performance I want.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, I always go back to this idea that, you know, just as good, just as good. Sometimes. Sometimes you can get away with the $300 1 to 6 rifle scope, low power variable optic, because for the accuracy you need, with the performance you need, $300 gets you what you need. For the guy who's going to beat the damn thing up against a tree 8 times and expect it to hold zero, you might have to spend a little bit more to get the performance you need, and just as good is not just as good at that point. It all comes to me, it always comes down to how much performance do you need? What is the lowest amount of money you have to pay to get that performance reliably? Pick those products and then use them. And then, for God's sakes, if you're going to friggin' spend $1,000 building a rifle, and I got news for you: once you start talking about optics, slings, magazines, and everything else, you're going to be over $1,000 so friggin' quick it'll make your frickin' head spin. But if you're going to spend $1,000 on a rifle, you better budget $500 for ammo in a class, because you and I both have seen people who have all the save queens in the world and don't know how to run them in anger. And I would rather the guy I would rather the guy with the poverty pony who's friggin' attended like 6 carbine classes and can run the thing like an angry ape. I'd rather that, because that guy can actually use the weapon for its intended purpose. And the person with the closet full of friggin' I don't know, Zev is one. I don't know what really expensive ARs are because I don't ever intend to own one. But the
Like a
guy with the
Noveski.
closet, huh?
Like a Noveski.
Yeah. Well, the guy with the closet full of those that has never attended a class and doesn't know how to shoot, it means nothing to me. So I would just say that if you are one of those people that says just as good is just as good, might be. If you're the person that says no, you must spend an obscene amount of money to get good performance, you probably have a much bigger wallet than I do. But I would argue that you probably aren't thinking this all the way through, because there is always that line where performance and price meet, and you may not need $500 performance. You might only need $100 performance. But if you're going to spend $500 on an optic and then sneer at spending $500 on a training class, I kind of question what you're doing. Yes, Joe, we're doing 2 a day because sometimes I have to. Sunday is the day for the Raising Values podcast, and when this happens to be the day that Andrew's available, I make myself available. So, have we thoroughly beaten just as good enough into the ground?
Yeah, I would say that the horse is to the glue factory.
Awesome, and we've made our case that disarmatards are disarmatards, and you can't honor the Second Amendment and preach for more gun control at the same time. Like, it just doesn't work. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Thank God. Okay. Well, I guess we'll sign this one out then. For the 2 of y'all that joined us, thank you very much. We're glad y'all came to see our ugly mugs in person. For those of you who are listening to this after the fact or are listening to this in audio, please leave us a comment, give us a like, give us a share. Share this with your buddies who are like-minded. We always appreciate adding to the audience. And we'll talk to y'all in another week. Goodbye to everybody.
Bye.